Hello, students, and welcome to today's class. Today, we are going to be visiting the community of monks and nuns who are responsible for caring for the teachings of the Buddha and providing the guidance to those who are not monks and nuns, which the group that we call laity. So the community of monks and nuns in Buddhism is called the Sangha. Let's take a look here. But before we do that, let's do a little bit of review. So behind me, we can see a middle way. Buddhism, as a tradition, emerges among a group of forest wanderers, a group that we call the Shramanas. Buddhism will distinguish itself from other forest wanderers, from other Shramana traditions, by claiming to be a religion that's a middle way. Well, what's it in between? What's it in the middle of? Two things. First, we have on this side, we can see an extreme of asceticism. So some of the forest groups, they were starving themselves to death, denying themselves food, denying themselves sleep. The Buddha would say that's pretty darn extreme. On the other hand, you have the palaces, you have the pleasure of the palace, the world that Siddhartha grew up into, full of intoxication, fine food, festivities. So the Buddha would say that in between these two, between extreme asceticism and extreme hedonism, the path to nirvana must be some kind of middle way. Second, this question of, well, do you exist? Do I exist? Some groups said, no, there is no existence. There is no soul. Nothing exists. Other groups would say that there is a permanent eternal I, and a permanent and eternal you. The Buddha will advocate a middle way. He'll say that there is no permanent and eternal self. However, this does not mean we don't exist. Beings do exist, however, they exist as something that is in flux, that's constantly changing and constantly arising and fading away, dependent on different factors. So a middle way between the extremes of eternalism, yes, I exist eternally, and the extreme of nihilism, no, I don't exist. So the Buddhism is our middle way path. Let's take a look a little bit more at our middle way path. Okay, so this is a symbol of the Buddhist Dharma, and I would like you to remember this as a symbol of the Dharma. And we can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 spokes of the wheel, symbolizing the eightfold path. The eightfold path, as we can remember, can be divided into 3 major categories: morality, meditation, and wisdom. These are the practices of the Dharma, and these practices are the practices of a middle way. This is the middle way tradition that the Buddha will teach. The middle way tradition has 3 main sources of refuge. So Buddhism doesn't necessarily argue that there is this God that's out there. In fact, it's often said the Buddha remains silent. The Buddha instead advocates these 3 sources of refuge, which is the Buddha, and the Buddha is kind of like what we call the enlightened teacher, the Dharma. This is the teachings of the Buddha, and the Sangha, the community of monks and nuns. These 3 jewels are intended to preserve and spread the teachings of the middle way path, the Dharma. And this serves as, by practicing the teachings, eventually one aims to obtain the state of nirvana, which is a jailbreak, a freedom from this cycle of old age, suffering, and death that we call samsara. And here we see a pictorial illustration of samsara. Now, the Buddha will eventually leave this world, as many, well, as all the great founders of religious traditions do. And what we're left with is a community of monks and nuns. What makes someone a monk and a nun? Well, there's a variety of ways of answering that, but the two most common ways are, number one is a commitment to celibacy, so a life of not engaging in sexual behavior. And second is a commitment to a variety of monastic rules and regulations via taking vows. How the monks and nuns look will vary from tradition to tradition, but the most common aspect is wearing robes and shaving one's head. The Buddha is said to have taught different teachings for different audiences. For monks and nuns, this group right here, the group that we call the Sangha, he is going to teach the Four Noble Truths and this doctrine of not self. However, for the laity, these are very difficult teachings, and perhaps the laity who have families, who have jobs, they're not going to be able to engage in the practices of meditation and really kind of follow this eightfold path. So for the lay audiences, those who are not monks and nuns, he taught a more gradual path consisting of generosity or dana, in particular giving food to monks and nuns and giving other alms, other like medicine or robes. In many Buddhist societies, what you'll see is monks wandering. This is especially the case in places like Thailand, where monks will wander the streets with a begging bowl, and laymen and lay women will make some kind of offering, and this produces good karma for the laity. And then morality, he'll teach the foundational practices of the Eightfold Path, which are the morality, but not necessarily meditation and wisdom to lay audiences. Buddhist society has two tiers. Let's take a look. We have the Buddhist monastic community. This is tier 1. The Buddhist monastic community, those who are living inside monasteries, this is called the Sangha. Tier 2, and within this we have monks, which is bhikshu, and nuns, bhikshuni. Then we also have the Buddhist lay community. This is the second aspect. And we have laymen, which is upasaka, and lay women, which is upasika, upasaka and upasika. The big difference between the two is that the monks and nuns, again, are celibate. They have a variety of vows they must take. And the laymen and laywomen, they can have families. They don't have to be celibate, but they must engage in a moral lifestyle and support the community of monks and nuns, the Sangha. All right, so Buddhist society, we can see here a woman making offerings to a monk. We can see 2 nuns here. So we have a 4-fold division of monks, nuns, laymen, and lay women. So this is the 4 tiers. So somebody is in a Buddhist society, one is either a monk, a nun, a layman, or a lay woman. And again, more pictures of the laity These are two lay women on their knees and making donations. And this is believed to bring very, very good karma in Buddhism. So early Buddhist monasticism, we want to know this word Sangha. The Sangha would strive for the ideal of nirvana, this blowing out and extinguishing of the three poisons, which through the practices of morality, meditation, and wisdom, leading to a freedom from suffering, freedom from samsara. Now, this is a word I would like you to note right now. This is the Vinaya. Vinaya is, in short, a collection of religious books or religious scriptures designed exclusively for monks and nuns. These are the rules that the monks and nuns must follow. So one could ask, well, what's the difference between a monk and someone who's not a monk? What's the difference between a nun and someone who's just a regular woman in a Buddhist society? Well, again, it's the celibacy, and in particular, all the rules of celibacy, the rules of owning money, the rules of when to eat, visiting other people like friends and relatives, they're all found in a collection of books called the Vinaya. So the Sangha are monks and nuns, and you can find monks and nuns in many religions, but these monks and nuns follow a special set of scriptures called the Vinaya. And the Vinaya consists of many vows. Above, the first and foremost is celibacy. Monks and nuns will focus more on study and meditation. And it's said that because the monks and nuns are engaged in observing these vows, engaged in the Eightfold Path, they become what's called a field of merit. This means that if a layman or laywoman were to give donations, particularly of food or medicine, to a monk or nun, they in exchange, the laymen and laywomen receive good positive karma. And then you have the lay disciples. The lay disciples, maybe nirvana is a little bit too hard, extinguishing anger, sensual desire, and ignorance might be a little bit difficult with all the different responsibilities that someone who's a layperson might have. Paying bills, taking care of a family, running a house, doing one's job, but a higher rebirth, in particular by supporting the Sangha. So the lay disciples will often strive for higher rebirth, the foundational practice of morality and generosity, in particular giving to the Sangha, the community of monks and nuns. Within the Sangha, you have certain individuals who have achieved a very high state, and this is called the Arhat. These are the individuals who have perfected the Eightfold Path and arrived at this state of nirvana. So they've reached nirvana, and there's two types. There's nirvana with remainder. This is when a monk or nun has achieved nirvana and is remaining in this world afterwards, walking around as a being free from these three poisons. And then nirvana without remainder. This is when a monk or nun, now technically a lay person can reach nirvana, but it's said to be much harder. But nirvana without remainder is when someone who has obtained nirvana, their physical body comes to an end, it expires. However, you can't really say that someone who's obtained nirvana will ever die, because to die is to be reborn again. And they've broken free from the cycle of death and rebirth. So they're free and liberated upon the extinction, the termination of their bodily life. The Sangha And let's meet some of the early followers. Well, let's take a look at this picture. You can see the Siddhartha. This is Siddhartha before he becomes the Buddha. He's not looking too good. You can see his ribs. He's really thin. Well, if we can recall from his life story, he hung out with a group of ascetics who believed that by denying or punishing the body, you can obtain some form of spiritual enlightenment. Well, Siddhartha, or the Buddha, will come to say that's too extreme, but he's not going to want to go back to living in the palace either. After Siddhartha becomes the Buddha, he goes back to these ascetics and he teaches them the path of nirvana, and they become the first group of disciples for the Buddha. We can also recall that the Buddha did have a family, and many say, oh, what a horrible individual, Siddhartha. He abandoned his own family. Well, according to the stories, Siddhartha, after becoming the Buddha, returns and teaches his family and guides his father and his other relatives to enlightenment. Here we can see him and his son. Remember, Siddhartha had a son, Rahula. In one story, when the Buddha returns to his kingdom, his former wife and the mother of Rahula says, look over there, that Buddha, he's your father. Go there and demand your inheritance. Now she's thinking he's going to get, her son will get the palace, the riches. But when Rahula goes and demands his inheritance, the Buddha makes him a monk and gives him the teachings of the Eightfold Path and leads him to nirvana. And he does this in turn in many stories to all of his relatives. Mahaprajapati. So Mahamaya is the mother of the Buddha. And we can recall that in the earlier lectures, when we read about the life story of the Buddha, she passes away. After that, a woman named Mahaprajapati, his aunt, will take care of Siddhartha. She will also become the first nun. In some stories, it's said that the Buddha was a little bit reluctant to ordain nuns, to bring nuns into the Sangha. And the reason for this is a fear. It's often described as a fear that if men and women were to live together in the Sangha, they might succumb to their temptations, their lust, and thus the Sangha could not remain this celibate community. When the Buddha was pressed, can a woman obtain nirvana? The Buddha says yes. And because he acquiesced that women can obtain nirvana, he decides to ordain women into the Sangha as nuns. And Mahaprajapati is the first nun. Devadatta, this is a jealous cousin of the Buddha. Now, in many of the Jatakas, Devadatta is the antagonist of the Buddha in training, the Bodhisattva. So Devadatta has been, according to the Jatakas and different traditions, for many lifetimes have been harassing the Bodhisattva that became the Buddha out of jealousy, spite. He is the main antagonist of the Buddha, and in some stories he joins the Sangha and he starts to create problems. He tries to bring down the Buddha within. Finally, he says, I'm going to kill the Buddha. To do this, he meets an elephant named Nalagiri, known for its being very powerful and having a harsh temper. Devadatta gets this elephant drunk, and the drunk elephant goes on a stampede and rushes the Buddha. As the elephant approaches the Buddha, seemingly about to trample the Buddha, Nalagiri bows down. Some stories he takes his tusks and will offer like a flower. And the Buddha gently touches the forehead of the elephant and blesses the elephant. Devadatta, who attempts to kill the Buddha and divide the Sangha. And dividing the Sangha is considered a major source of bad karma. If you try to break up the community of monks and nuns, the Buddhist traditions say that this is horrible karma, could lead to someone being reborn many lifetimes in a hell realm. But Devadatta, before he dies, will repent, and the Buddha will forgive him, and Devadatta will obtain the state of nirvana, at least according to many of the stories. King Bimbisara. So when we look at the followers of the Buddha, the stories surrounding them, they come from all walks of life: high caste, low caste, kings, queens, peasants. King Bimbisara is the first king to provide support for the Sangha. He sponsors the building of the first Buddhist monastery. The other is Anathapindika, and Anathapindika is a merchant, a wealthy lay disciple who will again support the monks and nuns. He will sponsor the development of a monastery called Jetavana Monastery, and I think this is perhaps part of the remains of the monastery. And this would be where the monks and nuns would go towards the rainy season. Now, typically monks and nuns during the time of the Buddha would wander and beg for food. However, during the rainy season, this was the one time of the year that they would go on retreat. And I guess others would bring them food and supplies. Part of the reason they would go on retreat is many creatures would come out during the rainy season, insects and so forth. And the Buddha didn't want his followers trampling on these insects and killing innocent life. We met Kissa Gotami earlier. This is the woman who had a deceased child. The Buddha says, bring me a mustard seed from a family that's never experienced death. I'll bring the child back to life. Kissa Gotami tries to find that mustard seed and she can't. And that's when the Buddha teaches her that all things are, pervaded by death and impermanence. She's thus able to overcome her attachment and obtain nirvana. Sujata. These are some of the famous women who were disciples of the Buddha. So when the Buddha was when he was still Siddhartha and trying to obtain enlightenment by starving and denying his body, he was about to die. At this time, Sujata comes and offers milk and rice to Siddhartha. In many traditions, it says that she actually saves his life by doing this. And because she saved the life of Siddhartha, she enables a Buddha to come into the world. Siddhartha would not have lived if it wasn't for Lady Sujata and her offering. And that's what the offering is, what gives Siddhartha the strength he needs to then meditate under the Bodhi tree and become a Buddha. Queen Kema. So Queen Kema was a really beautiful queen who took great pride in her physical beauty. This is Queen Kema right here. But the Buddha decides he needs to teach Queen Kema. Because remember, we talked about the concept of no self. The Buddha says that there is no permanent self because everything we identify with is impermanent. It's constantly in flux. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It just means that it's not something that permanently exists and can serve as a permanent foundation for some sense of I. Well, in Queen Kema's case, she's like, I'm a beautiful woman. I have this beautiful body. This is who I am. No one is more beautiful than me. I am beauty personified in this world. So the Buddha says, okay, well, I'll meet Queen Kema. When he meets Queen Kema, he uses his magical powers of his mind to create a servant, but not just any servant, a very beautiful woman who Queen Kema is jealous of. And she's like, oh my goodness, there's somebody more beautiful than me. Remember, the servant is someone that the Buddha has made with his own mind. It's a mental projection. So Queen Kema, what the Buddha does is this beautiful, beautiful servant mental image is fanning the Buddha. And Queen Kama is just so jealous, like there's somebody more beautiful than me. But what the Buddha then shows is this woman who's fanning him starts to grow old, and then older, and then older, and finally dies. So he shows Queen Kama, the woman who's very much identified with her physical beauty, how the body is impermanent. The body dies and decays. And according to the stories, Queen Kama, seeing this, overcomes her attachment to the body and her sense of self, her sense of identity, which she identified with the body, not knowing at a deeper level it was something impermanent. And Queen Kama then obtains a state of nirvana. She becomes an arhat, seeing as she overcomes her attachment to beauty. And she becomes a very revered nun after that. So we're talking about some of the famous women who were disciples of the Buddha, a revered nun who will teach the Dharma. Upalavana is another nun associated with the Buddha, and she's famous for battling, entering combat with Mara, the same being that attempted to prevent Siddhartha from becoming the Buddha, attempts to prevent Queen Upalavana from becoming a arhat. And this is what Upalavana says. Though 100,000 rogues just like you might come here, I stir not a hair. I fear no terror, even alone. Mara, I don't fear you. I can make myself disappear, or I can inside your belly. I can stand between your eyebrow. You won't catch a glimpse of me. I am the master of my own mind. The bases of power are well developed. I am free from every kind of bondage. Therefore, I don't fear you, friend. So she's saying, I've mastered my mind. I can do anything. I have control over you, Mara. But you know what, Mara? You're here trying to, you're too late. I've mastered my mind. I've mastered my senses. And she calls Mara what? What does she call Mara? A friend. She calls Mara a friend at the end. Shows some compassion towards Mara. Angulimala, one of my favorites. Angulimala starts off as a student, and here he is right near here, who's studying the spiritual path under a master. And he identifies, so remember this idea of a self, as a loyal, devoted student who wants to follow the religious path. That's his volition, that's his intention in life, and he identifies with that intention. Now, it's said that over time, this amazing student starts to surpass even his master in terms of knowledge. And the other disciples, they get very jealous of him. In doing so, they spread rumors, or, oh yeah, he slept with the master's wife, or he's been cheating, he's been doing all kinds of bad things. And this young boy who identified, whose sense of self was tied to this aspiration of becoming a great spiritual master by being a great student to this guru, he loses his identity, his sense of purpose, as he's kicked out. He's kicked out of this place of study. So going from a strapping young lad, his appearance changes. Again, the impermanence of the body. He goes from being a young student to the monster known as Angulimala. So this is the student who becomes a bandit with a sword and then a necklace. Angulimala means a necklace of something. It means a necklace of angulis. What are angulis? Take a close look. The anguli is a finger. So he becomes a bandit wearing a necklace of fingers. Let's take a look a little bit more at Anguli Mala. So we're going to look at the story of Anguli Mala.
Nearby village. I see something wrong in this village. Absolute silence. The streets are deserted. What is going on? Where is everyone? Ah, I can see a woman.
The woman was seen hurrying away.
Sister, why is everyone in such a rush?
Oh, you seem to know nothing. It's that terrible killer, Angulimala. He's roaming the countryside around here. Even the king and his soldiers are afraid to try and catch him. We're going to the city for safety.
Who is this killer? Angulimala? Who makes everyone so afraid and unhappy? I must go and meet him.
Anguli, who was sitting outside his den, planned the day's work. He was a fierce-looking robber.
So far, I have 99 fingers chopped off the hands of people I killed. One more finger and my necklace will be complete. I wonder who will be my next victim.
At that moment, the Buddha appeared, walking slowly and calmly.
How dare he walk past my den? I'll have one of his fingers to finish off my necklace. That will teach him a lesson.
Down he jumped and began to run after the Buddha. But run as he might, he couldn't catch up with him.
Stop! Stand still!
The Buddha turned and looked Angulimala in the eye.
I have stopped. I am still... It's you who needs to stop.
Don't try to fool me. I can see you moving.
Ah, but I meant something else.
Something else?
I have stopped. I am still because I never harm. I never kill. You can't stop. You'll never be still as long as you harm, as long as you kill.
No one had ever spoken to me like this before. I am a bit worried. This man clearly isn't afraid of me.
He became even more furious.
Don't you know who I am? I am Angulimala, the killer with a necklace of fingers. I am the terrible killer.
What you need, my friend, is to kill your hate and greed.
Friend? Did you say friend? I am surprised. No one had called me a friend for a very long time. I don't have friends. What have I been doing? No wonder no one wants to be my friend.
Angulimala, why don't you come and live with me and my friends? If you were brave, you could make a fresh start. Now, that would be a real adventure.
Are you sure this will be an adventure?
Oh yes, the greatest adventure of your life.
Then I will stay with you and your friends. These people are kind. They share their food and talk to me very kindly. No one is afraid of me.
In the morning, he threw away his terrible necklace of fingers. Then he cut off his long hair and beard and put on the same simple robes.
I am feeling better.
Thus, Angulimala, the terrible adventurer too, became a disciple of the great Buddha. The Buddha smiled at Angulimala, who smiled back. Then he got up and went off to help his new friends collect their food for the day.
Okay, so that was the story of Angulimala. Now, let's continue here with our lecture a bit. So Angulimala, a good student, who turn into a bandit. And you can see the story playing on this idea of no self. And the bandit then turns in by letting go of anger, by letting go of ill will and intention, becomes a disciple of the Buddha. So these stories again show how there's not this permanent self, how this idea of me and I or you constantly changing and in flux. It's only when we become attached to a certain idea, whether it was Queen Kama being attached to her beauty, or the student being attached to this idea of being a noble student who was then robbed and cheated and forced out of his school. Okay, let's move on here. A little bit more on the Sangha. After the Buddha passes, I call the Sangha the heirs to the Buddha. And this is something that I often emphasize. The Buddha is gone, but it's the Sangha, the community of monks and nuns, that remain to preserve these teachings. All right, so the Sangha preserves the Dharma. They're the field of merit. Via giving to the Sangha, one obtains good karma. The Sangha is often also a major force in governments, and they also have a huge force over the culture of laity. We'll see this a little bit more. We'll see this point some more later in the semester when we look at Theravada and Mahayana and Vajrayana societies. So the Buddha's passing. After the Buddha passes, this is a term I would like you to note, the Tripitaka, literally the three baskets. These are three baskets, not of eggs, they're not laundry baskets. These are baskets metaphorically, baskets of teachings, baskets of holy scriptures. And you have three major sets. You have the sutra, which are the sayings of the Buddha. You have the Abhidharma, which is the more higher advanced philosophical teachings of the Buddha. And then you have the Vinaya. And the Vinaya, these are the rules and regulations intended for monks and nuns to follow. And by being followers of the Vinaya, this is what makes the Buddhist Sangha unique. This is what it means to be part of the Sangha, is to follow these rules of the Vinaya. So, again, these are the three baskets. Sutra, these are general sermons of the Buddha. The Abhidharma, these are the higher philosophical teachings. So remember, these are all different baskets containing different volumes of literature, volumes of religious scriptures. And then finally, the Vinaya, these are the rules and regulations for monks and the operation of the monastery. So our early scriptures, we have the Tripitaka, the three baskets of the sermons of the Buddha, the sutras, the higher philosophical teachings, the Abhidharma, and the rules. This is the Vinaya. And around 20th century BCE, we start to see these collections coming together in written form, written in a language called Pali. And this will develop in the writing of these were oral traditions eventually written down, will start to develop around Sri Lanka, the development of the Pali canon. Pali is a name of a language. So, very important. Sutra, Abhidharma, Vinaya. Which of these three, which basket is reserved for the Sangha? That would be the Vinaya Pitaka. Pitaka means basket. So the basket of Vinaya often can be translated as discipline. So the discipline basket. The Vinaya Pitaka is the basket of discipline. And these are just the rules for the monks and nuns to follow. Well, why? And this might be something I would like you to think about. Why are the monks and nuns having to follow special rules? Something to think about and contemplate, maybe write about in the discussion board for this week. And there are two parts to these rules. We have the prati moksha. These are vows for the individual monk or nun to follow. And then next you have the rules and vows for the entire community. How are meals served? Where do different members of the community sit based on rank? And there are 4 central concerns with the Vinaya. The unity and cohesion of the Sangha. So one of the questions of, why rules? It keeps everyone together. These rules are what define us. These rules are conducive to the spiritual life, proceeding on the path of the Eightfold Path, comprising of morality, meditation, and wisdom. These rules are really what's going to help someone perfect the Eightfold Path and become an arhat, a being that's achieved the state of nirvana. Also, this is going to talk about how the Sangha and those outside the Sangha can relate to each other. The two are relying on one another, the Sangha for support, and then the laymen and laywomen for teachings and blessings. The Buddha also appears very much concerned with how the Sangha appears in the eyes of the public. If the public sees the monks and nuns as criminals, as greedy, as lazy, well, then they're going to stop supporting the Sangha. And without the Sangha, you're not going to have a community who's preserving and spreading the teachings of the Buddha. And the teachings of the Buddha are what we call the Dharma, hence the 3 jewels, Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. Sangha and laity, let's talk a little bit more. There's a symbiotic relationship. The two rely on each other. The monastics renounce the household life for the sake of religious life. So when we say the household life, we mean having a family, we mean engaging in sexual relations of any kind, having a career aspirations. And because they've given it all up, they depend on the generosity of lay populations to preserve and provide for their material needs, food, shelter, medicine. The lay population, they need this community of monks and nuns, the Sangha, for merit making, punya. So remember that the laymen and laywomen, it's really hard to obtain nirvana. It's not very easy. And the easiest way to do this is to become a monk or nun. Even then, it's pretty hard. Well, the laymen and laywomen are interested in obtaining this good merit so they can have at least a higher rebirth. And the best way to obtain good merit is to donate to the Sangha. The laity also depends on the Sangha for ritual services. So like when there's a death, a wedding, the monks and nuns have a role to play. Apotropaic, this means to ward off evil. Often the monks and nuns will make protective cords or protective amulets to ward off evil spirits. And it's the monks and nuns who can teach the Dharma to everyone else. One thing about Buddhism is that nuns have more rules than monks. The Buddha, according to sources, was afraid that by bringing nuns in, he would shorten the life of Buddhism by half. Again, it's not because there's anything wrong with women. The Buddha says that women have equal capacity for enlightenment, but it appears to be a insecurity about having men and women together and still maintaining the celibacy and the vows and preserving the Vinaya of the Sangha. And women are often have a secondary status to monks within the monasteries. So why do Buddhist nuns and Buddhist scriptures occupy a lower, lesser position than the monks in the early Buddhist Sangha? So that's another question you can maybe think about in the discussion board. But keep in mind that mostly men were in charge of preserving and copying and the scriptures. So the scriptures are produced by men, largely for male audiences. Okay, so we're bringing this lecture to a close, and here's a few key points. The Buddhist Sangha consists of monks and nuns. They follow a strict disciplinary code known as the Vinaya, while the laity followed the 5 basic ethical maxims known as the 5 precepts. We learn about this in the lecture on ethics, so no killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, indulgence in intoxicants, and divisive speech. The monks and nuns have those, but in the Vinaya, there's many more rules. The Vinaya, as a text, it regulates both the individual lives of the monastic Sangha members and the monastic institution itself. So how the monastery runs and what each individual must do or not do is regulated by the Vinaya. Finally, the monastic community and the laity are mutually supporting. They form a symbiotic relationship with each other. Okay, in the coming weeks, we'll learn a little bit more about the history of the Sangha, the role the Sangha plays in the formation of Buddhist governments, how the Sangha influences the culture of lay populations, and then we'll learn about different divisions, different traditions within the Sangha. The Sangha over time breaks off into different communities and groups, often interpreting the Buddha in very different ways. Okay, in the meantime, stay safe, stay well, and stay tuned.